This is a pretty interesting week for me because we have a lot of journalists on Driving.ca who've been around since the days when cars were not good. Unfortunately, nowadays, most cars are good, and I never got to experience that except for my own play in classics. But today, I think I'm getting a feel for Graham Fletcher and Brian Harper and David Booth's tales of testing cars like my old Lada Niva back when they were new, because this here VinFast VF8 may be a brand new electric vehicle, but my God, the quality in this thing feels something straight out of the past. I'm Al Walder, and I tend to like cars that aren't very good. I think it's charming. I own a Lada, I own an AMC Eagle, I own a 944, actually the 944 is pretty good. But the point is, I like classics because they've got some texture to them, you feel something. And that's all well and good when you get to be a selective nostalgist and just pick and choose that experience when you want. I still have a sensible Golf to get me about when I actually need to drop off a car or do what have you. But it's very different when you're spending $60,000 on a new primary vehicle that's gonna be your way about every day. This here VinFast is a bold move from a new upstart company, and it shoots high and is priced high, no less. But do you actually get more car for your dollar out of this thing? Well, no. Just plainly no. We're not even gonna pretend to hold that pretense at all through this review. This thing costs as much as a Hyundai Ioniq 5 with comparable battery size, massively inferior build quality, comically thirsty energy consumption. I just can't get my head around it. You probably aren't familiar with VinFast, but you've probably started to notice these cars around. And to be sure, they're actually pretty decent looking. Styled by Pininfarina, the same design contractor that was doing Ferraris for years and has done all sorts of really iconic vehicles, it's a respectable thing to look at. Climb inside too, and until you start to look closely, it seems to offer all that you might want out of a modern car. Here in this fully loaded Plus performance model, we've got heated and ventilated seats front and rear. We've got dual zone climate up here. We've got USB A and C chargers all around. We have advanced driver assistance with lane keeping and adaptive cruise control. We have automatic rain sensing wipers. We have just straight up electrification, and with the possibility for DC fast charging at up to 320 or a peak 350 kilowatts. Signal isn't canceling. No, now it's giving me the left. There we go. We've got 402 horsepower, 457 pound-feet of torque claimed, I'll get to that, and up to a claimed 378 kilometers range. It seems to offer most of what you'd expect, so where does it go wrong? Well, I want to start off by reminding you that this thing, starting from down at $56,000, is still up there in Hyundai Ioniq 5 territory. The Ioniq 5 is an excellent, small-looking but still sizable crossover. That thing offers great and actually reliable 350 kilowatt fast charging. On an 800-volt architecture, it just soaks the juice up and it puts it out really efficiently. We've seen economy figures of as low as some 19 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers in that thing. This doesn't even claim figures near that though, and that makes its overall range claims a little bit hard to swallow. Now, this here performance is thirstier, 378 kilometers. The regular Plus without performance pack, they say 373 kilometers, which is strange, but another matter. There's also the base Eco model, which claims 402 kilometers range with less power and output, and is probably realistically the way you would want to go if you actually wanted to buy one of these. Enercan consumption figures out of these different models, well, remembering that the Ioniq goes around 19 to 26 generally, this thing is a little bit surprising. That base Eco model, the one that's supposed to be... Yes, I'm aware there's a car there. That base Eco model, the one that is supposed to be the most efficient, that posts a starting Enercan economy figure of 28.7 kilowatt hours per 100. And when you get into these Plus models, the consumption ratings are insane. Looking back though at that 19 to 26 range that we want to be in, this thing just shocks. And our can economy figures are 45.2 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers here. That's for city, which should be the best. Now, when you get onto highway, you're looking at 49.8 kilowatt hours per 100 or 47.3 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers combined. That is appalling energy consumption. And it really makes us wonder how they are possibly claiming the range figures that they are. From a usable 87.72 kilowatt hour battery like we've got here, 47.3 kilowatt hours per 100 means less than 200 kilometers range. That is not nearly 378. That is unfathomable a delta. I don't understand how they're advertising this. And that's just the start, because this thing is trying to position itself in a semi-premium segment. This is not an inexpensive car at 56 to 63K. And yet we have things like this. These floor mats, these are a joke, oh my goodness. You look around the edges and they haven't even successfully stitched in all of the flocking on the carpet. It's just bulging out. Then you look in the trunk and we've got fleecing. That is, the carpet is starting to pull up from vacuuming. This thing's only got 3K on it. It is an almost new car. And yet the carpet looks like coconut hair. It's stringy. It comes up when you pull it or rub on it. It just, guys. And then we get to other quality things. There's basic stuff like just generally the plastics don't quite fit together in places. The wireless charger doesn't work reliably because the rubber inset doesn't actually sit in deep enough. We've got lots of creaks. We've got an overall very noisy ride and a very bumpy, bouncy, just really unbecoming ride. It's kind of like a really cheap General Motors crossover from 15 years ago. We've had constant faults. Faults that I've seen pop up on here on the infotainment include a headlight leveling system fault, a wireless charger fault, a window fault. The window wouldn't actually close because it was hitting a limit switch. Limit switches seem to be a bit of a trouble point too, because the sunshade here, there's a button right there in the infotainment, big and prominent, to recalibrate it if it won't close properly. They know that this is gonna happen. Our ambient lighting LEDs flicker in the dark, visibly, noticeably. The infotainment screen is hard to see in the daytime and suffers from significant glare. And the system itself is not only confusing and frustrating to navigate through and just sort of an endearingly low resolution, low quality output, but it also struggles to actually run the wireless Apple CarPlay that I've got set up here. Trying to summon Siri for voice control, sometimes it works, other times that little bubble pops up, but it just sort of sits there in purgatory for up to a minute before I just give up and go in and do things manually. It also doesn't hold drive mode settings properly. If you go into the drive modes and turn creep off, creep being like in a regular car where you let off the brake and it creeps forward, turn that off and put regen on full so it's like a one-pedal driving experience, creep may just switch itself back on willy-nilly at random when you're not expecting it, and you let your foot off and the car just starts moving. Or you get other problems, like driving it, expecting it to respond like a one-pedal car because of the setup, and it just freewheels when it's down low or at a stop. You come to a stop, and then it starts to topple back toward whoever's behind you. This is funny too, because the car can clearly not do that. If you have the driving assistance, like the cruise control on, and it comes to a stop, it will use the brakes to hold it in place. But they haven't seemed to apply that same logic to another everyday, very logical driving scenario. And then there's other stuff that's just like, guys, the turn signal stock is an old BMW part. You'll recognize this from last gen cars, but it doesn't respond reliably. There have been several instances on my road test this week where I've signaled, initiated a lane change, and partway through the lane change realized that I've cut someone off and the car hasn't actually blinked for them. Then there are other times where you signal for a full turn, and for whatever reason when you straighten the wheel, it doesn't actually cancel the signal. Then you have to try to manually turn it off by semi-notching it the other way. But that doesn't always work, so then you end up jigging it back and forth until it finally reads the other one, signals the other way, and then eventually maybe finds a cancellation somewhere. This isn't always the case, it's an intermittent problem, but it's a pretty glaring problem. And it's so significant, actually, that I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just doing something wrong or experiencing a fluke. So I called up one of our other contributors, Andrew McCready, who had one of these to test just the other week back in British Columbia. He experienced the same thing, as well as reporting something that I've also experienced, which is with these drive selector buttons down here. Instead of a shifter, you get buttons for PRNDL, and that's all cool. You push them, there are lots of cars that do that. But usually they work reliably. If you're doing quick shuffles, like a 3-point when you're in traffic, and try to do it too quickly, it doesn't always register the shift between reverse and drive, even if you were at a full stop. That means that you push it, then you push the pedal expecting the car to go backwards or forwards, and it does whatever it was still in. And that, if you're not ready for it, can be really jarring. As it is too, down at low speeds or when you're starting off from a stop, the pedal response is just kind of absent until it chunks in. It gets there, but it's like it's in that freewheel state and doesn't actually clue in to wake up. And in general too, waking up is a difficult point for this car. It's a little bit slow when you try to unlock it using the button out there, and when you finally reach your destination, you hit park, you undo your seatbelt, it thinks you're still ready to drive, and it chimes at you to do your seatbelt up. The whole car actually stays fully on until you get out of it and lock it, which is not ideal. And such a chime is only one of many. If you have the adaptive cruise control or driver assistance on, this thing is binging and bonging at you all the time, and it's really loud and really quite disruptive. And unfortunately, as you can probably guess, it's also not always doing that when it should be. You see, I've had many instances of, for instance, my blind spot indicators flashing as well as my ambient light in the door joining those as though someone is coming up beside me. The infotainment will even beep at me about it when I'm at a stop and when there's no one beside me. It's detecting cars pulling up directly behind me, square behind, and reading them as left or right blind spots. As for blind spots, the physical blind spots themselves are not great. The shoulder check here is okay, although the climbing belt line does intrude a little bit. But when you get back to that C pillar immediately followed by that really thick D pillar, you just can't see anything out that corner. Now, this does have cameras for when you need to maneuver for parking, but they also aren't very good. They feel several generations out of date. They take a particularly long time to actually initialize. Their resolution is very laughably low, and their frame rate is distinctly slow as well. That means that the actual number of images they transmit to the screen is intermittent. You get sort of a choppy as you notch along. Not even the old generation Toyotas that we lampooned for having such low quality cameras were ever anything like this. And then we get to just the general usability and experience in this thing. The seated position is okay, although the steering wheel fits a little bit to the side in a slightly odd position. It's also an unusually small steering wheel, which is not the end of the world, but it doesn't quite fit my preference. Also not fitting my preference is the way that a lot of things are controlled in here. For instance, the mirror adjustment and the steering column adjustment. This column should just be a manual column, especially in a car that's so crap as this one is. But they've done the Volvo EX30 thing. It's motorized, and to control it, you have to go into an infotainment panel and then use buttons on the steering wheel to actuate it. Same goes for the mirrors, and they're in separate infotainment panes as well, so you have to go one to the next to the next. It's just silly. And on utility, we've got a decent sized trunk. We do actually have space for a full-size spare under the trunk floor, although this thing doesn't have a spare, which would be cool if it was riding on run flats, but it's not riding on run flats. The frunk up front is small, but usable enough. It uses a BMW style double pull down here, which is great because that means you don't have to fish for a little thing down in there. Unfortunately, it takes quite a heave to shut it, and if you try to close it normally, it won't actually latch. That means that you have to come back around here, because there's no latch up there, double pull this again, and then try to absolutely whale it shut. Also requiring a surprising amount of force is the rear bench fold. It's a 60-40 split, as usual, but for some reason, this thing is distinctly heavy to try to pull upright. Oh my goodness. I actually deform the headrest as I try to pull upward on it, which is just, what? What? Like, this isn't a problem that exists in cars. It never has been. There is so much in this that just isn't a problem in anything else. And I'm dizzied by it. I feel like a duck in an old Looney Tunes thing with the bill spinning around in circles. Like, what's going on? The glass is from Securit, who is a good supplier. They've been doing Volvos and all kinds of stuff for years, but for some reason the systems in here just somehow don't quite mesh with it when you look through the head-up display ahead of you, which is, by all accounts, pretty okay. It's color, it's decent resolution, it's pretty responsive, it shows you what it needs, but it ripples as you move your head up and down with perspective, like there's a warble in the glass. Also interesting is that they've used laminated acoustic glass up front here, not in the backs, but up front, which is nice for wind noise. But that's something that's trying to keep noise down in a car that's already otherwise so noisy all other ways. And then as you come to a stop, you hear a sort of grinding sound from the rear end, like an old drum brake in my Lada Niva when it's rusty because I haven't driven it in weeks or months because of the headache. And then you get the windscreen wipers, which don't wipe very well and are really just unusually noisy. And honestly, that's inconsequential, but it just bring us back to just what's going on here, and really, where does this fit? Why would someone bother with this? And frankly, the only answer I can really come up with is really aggressive dealer incentives. They definitely do need to get these things out there to start building brand awareness, but they've done it in an odd way by pricing themselves in league with cars that are actually good that they haven't a hope of competing with. I very simply would not recommend that somebody buy one of these. Seeing the materials quality, the problems in execution, the oversights all about, I simply could not suggest that someone buy one of these with any anticipation for the long term. We have to be very careful in this space about not saying how a car will age, because of course we don't know for certain. But we can look at very low quality materials and construction like we see here and make a reasonable deduction. This is not a car that feels well built. This is not a car that feels ready for prime time. I could see this being a premium offering in other developing markets where vehicles like the Mitsubishi Mirage are more commonplace. The thing is that the Mitsubishi Mirage is actually quite alright. I was, to my knowledge, the first of our Canadian cohort to give the Mirage a fresh, fair shake when I reviewed it a couple of years ago. At that point, it was available from $13,000 with a 10-year warranty, 160K. Fabulous. That was one unit of car and built to a respectable standard. The thing is that this costs more than quadruple that and isn't built to a respectable standard. With all of that laid out, then, all I can really do is honestly and rather cynically thank VinFast for the stimulation of a new car review that feels so firmly of the past. This feels like I'm testing a Niva for the first time. And while the Niva's failings make it charming for me nowadays, this thing's failings, and at such a tremendous price, are simply unacceptable. For Driving.ca, I'm Al Alder. For more EV news, reviews, tests, previews, and all the rest, be sure to follow us online.